Series continues.
Why is violence and war such a recurring feature of the human experience?
Phil Donahue has some tough questions. Does our society encourage violence? Are men more violent than women? Are the roots of violence in childhood? Phil Donahue examines the human animal.
I'm Phil Donahue. Tonight we continue our series by examining another aspect of our behavior, the tendency to be violent and to make war. War and violence, the dark side of the human animal. In Washington, D.C., a very stark black granite slab bears the names of 58,124 men and 8 women. It is the Vietnam Memorial. It is the first attempt by any nation to remember in one place the name of every one of its citizens who died in a single war. The sea of names overwhelms the visitor. But the dead were not the only casualties. Not included on the memorial are thousands of other names of veterans who were permanently scarred, many of whom come here to pay their respects. Among them are those whose lives were forever changed, their potential dimmed, their promise cut short. Not all of the wounds were physical. The Vietnam Memorial is remarkable for its honesty. There is no illusion here. No prancing horses, no flashing swords, no glory. More than any other war memorial in the world, this monument provokes a question that is distracting in its own implication. The question is why? Why do we behave this way? In the 20th century alone, 90 million human beings have been returned to the earth, having died in a military conflict. Given our unique ability to love and to reason, our capacity for language, why is violence and war such a recurring feature of the human experience? This program does not attempt to analyze who or what country is right or wrong in this or any other military conflict. Rather, it attempts to share with you what science knows and what it does not know about the causes of violent behavior in the human animal. In other words, why are we behaving this way in the first place?
Cereal like it anywhere. There's raisin in the middle.
Kellogg's Raisin Squares.
Raisin in the middle.
Kellogg's Raisin Squares.
What a great sensation.
Whole wheat, sweetened with raisin.
A combination with flair. A tasty little package.
Raisin in there.
There's raisin in the middle.
Naturally sweet raisin.
Raisin in the middle.
Kellogg's Raisin Squares.
Raisin in the middle.
There's nothing like it anywhere. Kellogg's Raisin Squares.
Why go to some fast food place that serves dried out chicken when you can go to Kentucky Fried Chicken? They always have fresh, juicy chicken, and that secret blend of 11 herbs and spices makes it taste delicious.
Finger licking good! At Kentucky Fried Chicken, all we do is chicken, so we do it right. Anyone else's chicken may be left high and dry.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do chicken right.
These are American males at play. They are doctors and lawyers, plumbers, bus drivers, hospital administrators, and stockbrokers. Playing what they call the survival game, using paint pellets instead of real bullets.
You're dead! You're dead! You're dead! All right, here we go. We got somebody already. We got somebody already. All right, guys, yo. On the left, Mike, on the left. Somebody already. You got somebody already. You got somebody already. You got him in your sights, Colt. You got him?
Every weekend at several locations like this one around the country, about 30,000 men and women join teams whose members pretend to kill each other.
Mike, come on.
Only a few players are veterans of real war, and by now, with Vietnam already a dim memory, this form of recreation has quickly become popular. Each team tries to capture the other one's flag. In this case, the blues against the yellows. And today, the blues are victorious.
I had 7 kills. 4 of them, they all went home, though. 3 games, I did not get hit yet, and I have 12 kills in 3 games. 12 children? MVP. You got to take it as a joke. You can't be serious. It's just a lot of laughs. You got to come up with that in mind. You can't come up and be serious and try to hurt somebody or shoot for the head, as they say, in the eyes. You got to just take it for a day out and just a lot of laughs is all it is.
First of all, you go in with a sense of
play.
Just, you know you're not going to get hurt. So you go in and you take chances that you wouldn't normally take. Plus the accuracy of the guns leave a lot to be desired.
But, a lot to be desired.
You know, if it was rifles, it would be different strategy.
What's the deal here, guys?
I just want to say that here the victims. Wait, they want to see this here? Come on.
And you film a couple of losers here.
All we do is keep losing.
Blue dies.
These guys practice.
Blue dies.
What do you think makes these guys so good?
Ugly, so bad. Ugly, too. They may be winning, but they're ugly.
Like father, like son. In the human animal, the tendency toward aggression shows up overwhelmingly in the male. What happens when that tendency is fueled by a desire to win at any cost? What happens when he feels compelled to prove his manhood? What happens when the government sanctions violence? We kill our own kind on a larger scale than any other species. We are the only animals to declare war, and the ones who fight them are usually male. Why is human aggression so often a male activity? Females can be physically aggressive, to be sure, but not nearly as often as men. In the United States, almost 90% of violent crime is committed by males. Some of what we've learned about human aggression comes from scientific research among so-called lesser animals, like these rhesus monkeys. They're being studied at the Primate Research Facility of the National Institute of Health's Child Development Center in Maryland. Its director is Dr. Stephen Sumi. Let's talk about biology for a moment. You notice in this colony some infants are more active and aggressive than others.
And others are more timid and shy, at least under some circumstances. There's now accumulating evidence that at least part of this difference is due to genetic factors, to genetic differences between individuals that are expressed in terms of their likelihood of exploring something new or novel or exposing themselves to a challenging or stressful situation. And some individuals are bolder than others by birth.
And are males generally more aggressive than females?
By and large, but it depends on what type of aggression. If you're talking about physical fighting, there's no question males are much more aggressive than females, and this difference between males and females is present whether there are adults around or whether there aren't. The differences are greater if adults are around to reinforce these differences, but there's clearly a biological component.
Early men used that biological legacy of aggression to fight the elements, but rarely each other. They formed small nomadic tribes, family units of about 20, and to survive, they learned the practical art of cooperation. She bore and nurtured the children. She gathered the fruits, nuts, and roots that were necessary to sustain life. He wielded primitive weapons and took on the more physically dangerous task of bringing down some mighty game. But then about 10,000 years ago, we invented agriculture. And we created settlements, surplus food, and for the first time, private property.
With the advent of agriculture and animal husbandry, too, it was possible for the first time in 3 million years for these former nomads to settle down in fixed agricultural villages and accumulate surpluses of food, fuel, clothing, and large land holdings. For the first time, therefore, it became possible for people to rely on stealing another man's goods rather than earning his goodwill. And out of that circumstance came the robbery of goods, that, especially the large-scale robbery that we now call war. Before that, war on any scale exceeding a ritual skirmish was unknown.
The male's larger muscular structure, given to him by thousands of years of evolution, prepared him for human combat, one-on-one. And even today, he has a greater tendency toward aggressive activity because his brain is bathed by the hormone testosterone. The arousal mechanism in his brain is easily triggered. These natural tendencies helped us in the wild, but today, they too often lead to violence. The fighting by this soccer crowd was in Europe, but violence in the United States has reached staggering proportions.
It's an epidemic. If you look at not only at the absolute numbers and the number of people who are harmed, maimed, crippled, or killed by violence, but also at the change through time in the last 25 years. That's more than doubled. While other developed countries, it's held fairly steady over that period of time. Clearly, we have an extraordinary problem, and it's to a considerable degree an American problem. So I'd say it's extremely serious. If it were due to anything else, a disease, a germ, with figures like this, it would be a national emergency. There would be 100 centers for disease control all over the country addressing themselves to this and nothing else.
We are not the only animals that are violent, but other animals rarely fight to the death. They instinctively obey a biological inhibition against killing their own kind. These animals usually walk away from the bloody business of murder. This is our biological legacy. So why, with our greater intellect, we so often choose otherwise, is one of the most important questions on the human agenda. We know that we have a natural aversion to bloodshed, but often we choose to overcome it. We glorify violence, and how we portray ourselves powerfully influences the way we behave. Our American heritage includes sagas of courage and fighting on the western frontier, and we've been celebrating that history ever since. Our popular culture romanticizes violence, even when the so-called good guys use it as a way of settling disputes. Our leading men don't talk it over, they fight. And some of the most famous names in our history are real-life criminals who became legends, like Billy the Kid, Jesse James, John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde. These same legendary American figures have become the dramatic heroes of our most popular movies. The macho leading man gets what he wants by violent means.
Go ahead. Make my day.
These catchphrases are even used by our leaders.
And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
Rambo drew over $250 million to the box office, enhancing the male image as a tough guy. There's been violence in every human society, so to blame popular entertainment for aggressive behavior is only part of the story. Nevertheless, the expanding technology of entertainment, television, VCRs, and cable system, has given greater access to a wide variety of violent material to the most susceptible viewers of all, our children. The syndicated cartoons you're about to see have been cited by the National Coalition of Television Violence as among the most violent, averaging 20 aggressive, violent, or threatening actions per segment.
Yo, Joe! He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe! G.I. Joe is there.
At Yale University, Doctors Jerome and Dorothy Singer have done extensive research on the effects of TV violence.
The cartoons in general are full of a great deal of violence. Every kind of quarrel, every difficulty is settled by some character smashing another one on the head or squashing it and so on. Now that's funny up to a point. After a while, the message that comes through from the cartoons, and a message that is made even more strong by the evening shows that children watch, is that the way you resolve problems is by socking the other guy, by pushing him, by punching him.
I mean, a little 3 or 4-year-old really doesn't need 6 hours of animation and loud music and squeaky voices bombarding them on a Saturday morning. And I wouldn't deprive them of cartoons. We all grew up on cartoons. But I think an hour for a 3 or 4-year-old is enough. There are so many other things a little one could be doing.
Like playing with toys. But today, toy sales are often tied to the cartoons. 7 of the top 10 toys are related to violence. War toys are back.
Toys themselves aren't intrinsically violent. I mean, kids have always played with cowboy toys and Indian toys and toy soldiers. I would certainly say that those are the kinds of toys that would lead to violence. What we're saying, though, is that how you use the toy really can make a difference. We've watched children in one of the schools in the New Haven area playing with the He-Man Masters of the Universe toy. And most of them copy the storylines that they watched on TV. A lot of aggressive fighting, or trying to get the bad guy to be thrown off the table and the good guy wins, and they were taking ray guns and using karate chops and hatchet chops and stink or emitting odors to get rid of the bad guys. When the teacher introduced a small, little, soft, fluffy toy, the play changed dramatically. These same evil characters suddenly were nurturing and gentle. And I love to see the mothers do some of that. Give them some other toys interspersed with the toys they get from TV, and you'll see some transformations of play.
What we have found is that heavy viewing children, ages 3 or 4 or 5, turn out to be more violent or aggressive with other children. Now, when we say violent, we're talking about a 4 or 5-year-old. We don't mean shooting anybody, but we mean in the play that they engage in nursery school, they go over and knock other kids on the head. They knock over their blocks. They generally disrupt. That gets them off on the wrong foot as children. They begin to be labeled as, quote, bad kids by the teachers. We have found that the more aggressive kids tend to be isolated more socially, and they are off to a bad start in the early years of school.
And the child is father to the man. In TV shows for adults, the good guys use violence to solve almost every problem. Rather than controlling our aggressive instincts, we encourage them. After all, who doesn't want to be a good guy? And studies show that a small minority of people who already have the tendency to be violent will tend to be more so after heavy doses of violent TV shows. More important, we are so inundated with violent acts in our popular culture that we run the danger of becoming desensitized to cruelty, more accepting of it, perhaps even amused by it. We like to feel superior to the Romans who used to get their kicks by watching the real thing, violence and killing. But really, how different are we? The realistically portrayed violence and killing in our television shows and movies is not the only way we get our kicks. we too like to have our arousal buttons pushed by the real thing. And our society appears to go out of its way to encourage aggressive behavior. Given the male's natural biology, the popularity of contact sport is not surprising. And sometimes we root for much more body contact than is allowed within the rules. Like it or not, we like this. We love this. And when violence disrupts our national pastime, everybody wants to get involved. Nobody ever went for a beer during a baseball fight.
I think a lot of the striving after winning that we see in our society, Western society generally, is evocative of terrible emotional distress and of even of mental illness. And so I have recommended in some of my papers that one of the things we might aim at in the course of changing our society is a reduction of this attitude that we particularly have inculcated, that nothing matters but winning and beating people.
That was illustrated during the 34th annual Gator Bowl. Ohio State was catching up until a rival player intercepted a pass. Coach Woody Hayes lost his self-control and slugged him. Coach Hayes was not unlike many others who have sometimes made winning more important than the game. Sometimes the competition consists of two human animals who seemingly try to kill each other. The effect on the crowd is obvious. Is violence a catharsis? What about the theory, if we watch it, we won't go out and do it?
That's a chestnut that has got to be laid to rest.
Right.
They're all of the, I mean, there are just dozens of psychological research studies which show that people exposed to aggressive material become more aggressive afterwards, not less aggressive. There's practically no serious research support for the notion of what's called catharsis, or the reduction of violence by viewing violence. I'm not going to deny that people are attracted to watching violence, but this doesn't necessarily mean it's good for them. People are attracted to overeating also, and it's not good for them.
This is one neighborhood in New York City. It also happens to be one of America's many slums, where poverty and violence seem to go hand in hand. It's easy in a neighborhood like this to understand how the human animal's aversion to bloodshed can be overcome. Yet the people who study our behavior have learned that it's not poverty alone that turns us violent. It's the feeling of failure and frustration and the inevitable anger that poverty produces. Since 1947, when the Census Bureau began collecting statistics on the haves and the have-nots in our country, the gap between the rich and the poor has never been wider than it is right now. The poverty of money, the poverty of self-respect, of fulfillment, of hope, produces a vacuum which is filled by a torrent of anger, rage, and violence. And it is giving us one of the highest crime rates in the world. In actual numbers, Americans commit more than 18,000 murders a year. And more than 1 million other violent crimes, including rapes. Most of the violent crimes in this country are committed by young men under the age of 25. With such ominous numbers, looking for easy answers isn't enough.
It would be very simplistic to say that it's television that's created all of the trouble in the world. There are economic reasons for why we're seeing some of the violence in the world today. There are some countries where there isn't enough food, there aren't enough jobs, even in this country. So to blame it all on TV is in effect taking away from some of the real issues that we have to face in terms of housing, in terms of feeding people, in terms of jobs, in terms of the amount of alcoholism that's going on in this country, and drug abuse.
The tragic fact is that a majority of murders are committed by and against people who already know each other.
people have seen fights where people really got hurt, really hurt? How many people have seen fights where people were killed? How many have known somebody to be killed in a fight? Okay. Is that somebody close, like a friend? Or, you know, I think that we're really...
Deborah Stith works with young people in the Roxbury section of Boston. Among American black males between the ages of 17 and 24, homicide is the #1 killer. Dr. Stith tries to prevent violence as part of her medical practice. She has the class simulate the beginnings of a fight so they can learn how to walk away in the face of provocation. In class, and especially on the outside, walking away is not so easy.
It's much different out here than what we was talking about in class, because everybody out here want to be #1, like I said. And around here, people don't walk away from fights. They don't nobody want to be no chump or no sucker, so everybody's out to prove their point and all that.
And the strongest pressure to prove their point comes from within the group. The reality of young men in groups often leads to violence, according to anthropologist Lionel Tiger.
Whenever you get a bunch of people who feel that they're powerful, who feel that they're responsible for the welfare of those around them, if they happen to be men who got their positions through the exhibition of what they call strength and forcefulness and machismo or whatever, be careful. This group of individuals is at risk of thinking their way into either creating a problem that they will then solve in some mean manner, or they will actually solve the problem in a mean manner.
One of the most violent expressions of men in groups is found in urban street communities called gangs. 4 years ago, Carlos Parkin was the leader of a gang in East Oakland, California.
If you don't get in a gang, the rest of the guys that are in gangs are going to beat the living light out of you every time they see you, because they're going to say, oh, this guy, you know, he's a punk, he's a nobody, he doesn't have guts enough, you know, to be in a gang.
The young men of a gang are following a natural inclination to establish their manhood, impress the ladies, and stake out their turf. Through their violence, they are crying out, look at me, look at me.
I'm brown, right? Poor. The only thing you can do around here is wait for summer and hopefully you can get a minimum wage job, you know, just for a few months. That's if, you know, if it was there. If not, it's all about hanging out on the street, drinking cheap booze, and fighting.
Kids don't have anything to look forward to. They don't have a future. They're not choices out there for them. They're not the options that many other kids have, so that they can't weigh their decision whether to fight or not against anything else. The scale is very weighted toward the immediate. There's not. And I think that may be the difference. And I think poverty translates into that in terms of the self-esteem and the options that students have.
This is Carlos Parkin today. This is a neighborhood where he grew up and the house where he was raised.
My favorite weapon was the chain off of the chainsaw. You know, I'd wrap the one end up real good with a piece of stick and then wrap with a tape, and here you had like a moving knife. That like if I was to slice you in your face, you're gonna have a scar for the rest of your life. Every time you look at a mirror, you're gonna think of the neighborhood that did that to you.
Carlos was in and out of jail on many different occasions.
How about the other charge?
No, that's been dropped.
Most time I've ever done at one time in one period was 11 months. But in between that, I've done like, you know, 2 months here, 4 months there, 10 days here, 30 days there. You know, it all gathered up to 2 or 3 years of my life that got taken from me, which I'll never get back. Never a day. It's a waste of my life. And, hey, I never give these guys the system an opportunity to take any more years of my life from me, because they're going to be spent on me.
Carlos has stuck by that pledge, having taken responsibility for creating a new life. He still lives in East Oakland with his girlfriend and daughter, and he's still careful about whose turf he crosses. Carlos paid his debt in jail and found the motivation to get out of the gang, but that is the exception, not the rule. And every year, more and more young people fail to get out in time. For the majority, often from broken homes and with a poor education, the gang promises more immediate self-esteem than the rest of society seems to be offering. Our young people hang out together in a culture where violence is often accompanied by drugs and alcohol and easy access to deadly weapons. So it's not surprising that most violent crimes in this country are committed by and against people who live in conditions like this. They are the perpetrators and they are the victims. Carlos had 7 brothers. One of them died a violent death at the age of 22.
There's too many dreams left unfulfilled. Too much to be tasted. Too many hopes left unrelieved. But it is a reality that we have to accept. And we have to accept it in the light of our faith. And our faith is in God, the powerful one.
Y'all gotta slow down, man. Gotta slow down. All of us. Pushing our lives too fast.
While violence appears to be all around, only some of us are engaged in it. Charles Darwin's theory is not so much explained by the popular phrase survival of the fittest as it is by survival of the fitting. Cooperation promotes the survival of our species more than confrontation. How then does the human animal get its young males to go off by the millions to fight and die in war? The state not only declares war, it glorifies it. It uses flags and uniforms and medals and, of course, parades.
Left foot, right foot, left. Yeah, left foot, right, left. When I say left, your left foot strikes the deck.
Young men must be taught to kill, but unfortunately, it's not difficult. They are motivated by the specter of an enemy that must be stamped out.
Strikes the deck.
You want to rip out his eyeballs again? You want to tear apart his love machine? You want to destroy him, Private? You don't want to have nothing left of him. You want to send him home in a glad bag to his mommy, huh? Hey, show no mercy for the enemy. They are not going to show it on you. Marines are born trained killers. You got to prove that every day. You understand? Yes, sir.
In just 11 weeks, these recruits will learn much more than left foot, right foot. The Marine Corps, like all armies in the world, understands and uses a young man's need to belong, much as an urban street gang does. Individual identities become indistinguishable from the identity of the group.
A Marine is laying out in the middle of a paddy, and he's wounded. He's not crying for mom. He's wounded. Another Marine is in safety because he got behind a dike. He's real safe. But he crawls out into that paddy, and he pulls that wounded Marine to safety, risking his own life. Why is that done? You ask yourself that question. All you care about is he's a Marine. And he's in your unit. He's one of you.
Up! in the morning with the rising sun. Up in the morning with the rising sun. You gotta run all day till the running's done. You gotta run all day till the running's done. Heavy on the left foot.
The motivation for armies fighting each other is even more passionate when the politics of nationalism is joined by religious fervor. And nowhere is that more evident today than in the troubled Middle East. Here is the Holy Land, the Holy City, Jerusalem, the place where ideas and incidents have occurred that have shaped the behavior of half the human race. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built on the hill called Calvary, Christianity's most sacred ground. It would be 300 years following the crucifixion before Constantine the Great would make it possible for Christians to say, "This is my city." The Western Wall, HaKotel HaMa'aravi, the remains of David's temple built in the 10th century B.C. This is the central shrine of one of the world's oldest faiths. This is the Wailing Wall, an ancient edifice that moves Jews to proclaim with a passion that comes from the soul, "This is my city." Dome of the Rock, 7th century. The Muslims ruled Jerusalem. They built their mosques atop Jewish temples. Both religions celebrated the oneness of God. This, for the Muslims, is where Muhammad ascended into heaven, not far from the spot where Christians believe Jesus did the same thing. Next to Mecca and Medina, this is the Muslim faith's holiest shrine, and the Arab world's claim on the land that is Jerusalem. Jerusalem may have been captured and recaptured more often by more groups of people than any other city on earth. And the attending bloodshed here has been enough to turn away the eyes of any God in heaven or anywhere else. Why should this be so? Why should religion, the wellspring of so much that is lovely, why should religion, which teaches peace and justice and gives meaning to life, be so provoking in the human animal's recurring history of taking life away? Guns fire bullets, but the mind pulls the trigger. Terrorist leaders isolate young minds within a group psychology that justifies any kind of violence.
They are beating the passengers. They are threatening to kill them now. They are threatening to kill them now. We want the fuel now. So they're about to shoot a passenger. They just shot a passenger to the 847.
Certain governments and groups who feel politically impotent resort to terrorism. They strike at their enemies by selecting symbolic targets to call attention to their political cause. Whether they are called terrorists or freedom fighters, it's still all the same, a perception of us against them. We make it easier to kill each other by finding a reason to hate. And only we use religion, nationalism, race, and cultural differences to create imaginary barriers that unnecessarily divide us. It could be American citizens who believe that white means us and black means them. It could be Christians versus Jews, rich versus poor. Or Irish Catholics against Irish Protestants. The divisions are often long-standing and deep, and sometimes backed by the state.
South Africans' problems will be solved by South Africans and not by foreigners.
The disease in this country is apartheid.
The division could be fundamentalist Muslims against most of the outside world. The violence continues, and the gulf grows wider. Meanwhile, Washington and Moscow threaten each other with talk of us against them.
While they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, They are the focus of evil in the modern world.
American imperialism has perpetrated a new bloody crime, from rude and inadmissible verbal attacks against Libya to naked aggression.
This mad dog of the Middle East has a goal of a world revolution.
President Reagan should be tried as a war criminal and murderer of children.
Behind the imaginary distinction between us and them is an old biological fear of strangers, carried over by evolution. We are all born with this primitive response. It shows up to one degree or another between the ages of 6 and 12 months, and accounts for the fact that strangers in a crowded elevator still have trouble looking each other in the eye.
The tendency to be afraid of strange and different people is so widespread in children as they grow up that I have to accept that it's not learned. But learning can either diminish it or reinforce and strengthen it. And in most societies of record, learning and culture have unfortunately reinforced it.
To get people to go to war, nations reinforce our fear of strangers by making the enemy less than human. In World War I, we depicted Germans as ape-like Huns. In World War II, we pictured the Japanese as grotesque monsters intent on raping our women, the Yellow Peril. The state builds on our fear of strangers to create monsters, relentlessly bombarding its citizens with exaggerated images. And during wartime, the campaign is intensified.
Have you killed a Jack soldier today? This is America, where we make justice for the soldiers of Japan who tossed Chinese babies on their bayonets. Justice for the soldiers of Japan who buried Chinese men and women alive. Justice for the soldiers of Japan who ravaged and slaughtered the Chinese people.
In South Africa, there is no declared war, but in this state-sponsored class, impressionable white youngsters are clearly taught to distinguish between us and them.
What does our skin look like? What color is it? A light skin. And our eyes? What are they like? We have light eyes. What are our lips like, our white lips? Yes, they're not so thick, are they? And now the black people. What's their skin like? Jackie? Dark skin. There's a difference in the eyes. And in the noses? Their hair is crinkly. And their noses are black. What are their mouths like? Their lips? Thick lips.
The message is not specific, but its meaning is clear. Building a prejudicial view guaranteed to last a lifetime. Nazi propaganda was quite specific. It warned citizens to beware of Jews without beards, likening Jews to deadly rats spreading pestilence and disease.
Sie sind hinterlistig, feige und grausam und treten meist in großen Scharen auf.
A government skillfully manipulated anti-Semitism into a murderous frenzy against the Jews of Europe, and the result was the systematic, brutal killing of men, women, and children by the millions. This is what happens when we fail to see ourselves in another person's face. There's a reason the military does not allow fraternizing with the enemy. Every general knows how tough it is to kill a man after you've seen a picture of his kid. Killing each other is not a natural activity. But our technology, especially in the 20th century, has overwhelmed our biology. That's because advances in technology have removed us from having to look each other in the eye. We began with our bare fists. We fought face to face. Later, we invented the gun. And before our natural inhibition against killing our own kind could stop us, we fired. In time, the machine gun meant one soldier could do the work of many. The tank took soldiers out of the trench making killing even less personal. The airplane meant we could kill from far above with cold efficiency and without ever seeing the gore. The full fury of modern hardware was unleashed by the German bombing of Madrid in 1936 during the Spanish Civil War. The world was shocked by this unprecedented, brutal attack on civilians. Later, when the village of Guernica came under attack, the only objective was to terrorize the population. The fear and horror were given powerful expression by Picasso for mankind to remember. Now war involved not just the participants, but the bystanders as well. With nearly 1,600 citizens killed and more than half the village destroyed, a German bomber pilot called it a regrettable mistake. The bombing of London left no more pretense about mistakes. To demoralize the Allies, the Nazis used men, women, and children as deliberate targets. Late in the war, the West took unnecessary retribution against non-military German targets. Huge fleets of American bombers targeted Dresden by day. The British headed for the same targets by night. Over a 3-day period, Dresden was an inferno. Firestorms sucked the oxygen out of the air, and many died from breathing carbon monoxide. Estimates of the civilian death toll were as high as 300,000. At times, more than 800 planes were used in a single raid. But by the end of the war, we had become much more efficient. A single plane carried a single bomb and caused the same destruction. Hiroshima. And the human animal had come a long way from defending his crops. Now to kill each other, we don't even need a plane. Now the human animal can fight wars from windowless rooms with upholstered chairs beneath the ground.
And insert the keys and strap in each
These young men are rehearsing the 7 stages necessary to launch a guided missile.
Step 1 is accomplished. Check PLCA launch option, required number. Number's in. The enable switch is enabled. This time the command is being transmitted to all missiles in the squadron. Yeah, let's wait for indications. Okay. Ready on my mark? I'm ready. 3, 2, 1. Mark. And release.
The result is no longer us against them, but the human race against itself.
In the 80s, women are keeping pace with men more than ever.
There's no such thing as my roles and his role.
But what is the difference between men and women?
I think it's a lot easier being a man.
They're still threatened somehow. Is it biological, or does society dictate what roles played?
The evidence is overwhelming.
Phil Donahue examines the human animal tomorrow.
20th century technology has written an entirely new chapter in the history of human conflict. War and violence now threaten not only the participants, but the entire civilization as well. The only thing more ominous than that is the belief that we really can't do anything about it. Believing the apocalyptic view of Armageddon ensures the fulfilling of the Bible's prophecy. Against this foreboding view of the future have gathered a growing number of people worldwide who believe that what the mind can conceive, the mind can achieve. The same brain that let the nuclear genie out of the bottle most certainly has the capacity to control it. Failing to do so risks the survival of our children and our children's children. Only ignorance can overwhelm the most fundamental natural legacy of the human animal, the relentless will to survive. Any examination of the human animal, including this one, reveals the evidence that proves we can. We can save ourselves. I'm Phil Donahue.
Later tonight on the Best of Carson, Johnny welcomes Terry Carr. Then ease into the night with David Letterman as he welcomes John Candy and Eugene Levy to Late Night with David Letterman. Tonight on NBC.
Our culture reinforces those differences.
Dr. Einish, one of the points you make is that if you walk through any playground, you're going to observe certain differences in the behavior of boys and girls.
Girls are swingers. They swing on swings more than boys do, although, of course, boys swing on swings. The boys are more usually involved in rough and tumble play. Here we see right over here 2 boys rolling on each other, throwing sand on each other. Here's another set. That's more likely to happen in boys than girls. They have larger muscle activities than girls do. Girls pick structured activities more than boys, and they tend to hang out near teachers or around teachers more than boys do. Girls jump more than boys. As we look around this playground, I think it's quite clear that you see girls and boys doing all the same things. We're only talking about differences in frequency. We're not talking about differences in which boys only do it or girls only do it. And that's very important to keep in mind. There are very active little girls in this playground, and there are boys who are very inactive. And you cannot make generalizations about any child in a specific situation.
It does appear, however, that it is easier for the culture to excite this kind of behavior in males and also to exaggerate it if this is the imagery that surrounds them.
And we probably reinforce behaviors that we consider to be masculine in little boys, like being highly active and so forth. And we probably punish girls for being, in many cases, for being too active or being too much like a boy. And that certainly affects them and limits their behavior, both of those reinforcements.
So what would you say then, what's the consequence of these observations?
Well, I think we want to allow children to do, individual children to do what is comfortable for them. We want to encourage them to expand their horizons, both physically and intellectually. It's the responsibility of teachers to try very hard not to treat boys and girls differently, for parents to try hard not to treat boys and girls differently in terms of what we make available to them and what we allow them to experience during their young years, and not to limit them by our ideas of what we think is masculine and feminine.
I don't know exactly when it became clear. I have the feeling it was about when I was in 8th grade that that girls who did well in science started to be looked upon as a little bit freakish, and that boys was correct, and the boys would be involved in the laboratory sciences and so forth.
On average, the hopes and dreams of boys are expanded by the culture, while the hopes and dreams of girls are diminished. Near the center of this influence is the teacher. Here's one seminar in the effort to remind teachers of their own biased behavior.
Hey, today we're going to have an exciting spelling bee. Why is it going to be so exciting?
Girls against the boys.
The girls against the boys. Wow. Can you imagine if the teacher said, hey, boy, are we going to have a spelling bee today. It is the Jews against the Christians. The Irish against the Italians. The blacks against the whites. It's ridiculous. Hopefully it's ridiculous. We're not going to see. But I can guarantee you, unfortunately, that as we sit here in this workshop today, somewhere in the United States, there is a teacher who is saying, oh, are we going to have an exciting spelling bee? Do you do it? Yeah.
American University education professors Myra and David Satker conduct seminars to alert teachers to subtle sex bias in the classroom.
When we work with teachers, what we traditionally do in our workshop is show them a film of a classroom.
The teachers try to look for any kind of unfairness, And despite their years of experience, many fail to recognize their own bias.
What do you think about this teacher? Good teacher or not?
Yes.
Like her? Good style. What did you like about her?
She picked up on the words of the students and asked questions on what they were saying.
She picked up on the male students. She fed the guys like nobody's business. Oh, she fed the guys. Yes and no questions. She let them. She had more time that she was giving into them.
Wait, I'm getting very confused here. You know, and I have a feeling if I went around to each one of you would have a different opinion or a variation on whether you think she's biased or not. So, in the interest of time here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to take a stand in one of 3 positions.
In their voting, most teachers find either very little unfairness or none at all. In this group, only 3 teachers saw the problem. David Sadker gives a special demonstration for emphasis. He patronizes the females while pushing the males to do better.
Good morning, class.
Good morning.
Okay, today we're going to review your homework assignment that you did last night, The Gathering Clouds of War, about the American Revolution. So why don't you take out your homework and let me check your answers. Okay, Donna? Okay. 13 and 16 aren't right on yours, Donna. Thank you. Corinne. Oh, Corinne. Would you look at how neatly Corinne has done her homework? Gosh, this is the kind of homework I love to pin on the bulletin board for Parents' Night. It's just beautiful. Okay, now this is Mark. And Mark, you also got 13, 15, and also 17 wrong, because I think sometimes you got some wrong because you looked at the wrong paragraph. Okay. I know you can do better than that. Okay, this is Scott. Okay. Sit up straight. Scott, there's no reason why you can't do this homework. It's the same homework you had last year at this time. That was a segregated class. Not segregated by race, that we're used to hearing about, but segregated by sex, that we're used to accepting and not thinking about and allowing to happen. Usually not done by the teacher, usually done by the students, but permitted by the teacher. And that sex segregation can be very, very detrimental. For one thing, it allowed me to go over to the boys' side of the room.
Remember, the most important thing in the classroom is the teacher's attention. Who we give our attention to, those are the students likely to achieve.
Okay, do you remember how we started? We had 15 people say the class was fair, 14 say there was some bias, and 3 say there was heavy bias. That's in a class where 2/3 of the teacher's time was spent with boys, where the teacher praised boys 4 times as often as girls. But we are used to, accustomed to seeing males talk more, interact more, be rewarded more. It doesn't look that unusual to us. But let's not confuse what happens a lot with what's equitable.
What happens to these boys and girls as they go through school? Now, we're used to thinking of girls getting all those good grades. But in terms of standardized achievement, what we find is that when they start out school, up in kindergarten, who's ahead, boys or girls? Yes, they are. They're better than boys in reading. As a matter of fact, they're doing just fine in math and in science. By the time those promising little girls leave our schools in the 12th grade, they are behind in almost everything.
The evidence is overwhelming. In 1,000 ways every day, we are encouraging the boys and discouraging the girls. And it is happening at a time when society needs their ambition and their talent most. The Sadkers and other researchers are spreading the word. Equal attention means equal opportunity for our children to learn and achieve, so both woman and man can benefit. In just about every culture in recorded history, men have had more opportunities than women. The female Michelangelos, for example, never materialized because they weren't expected to. Not encouraged, and in most places they were even forbidden to take part in a man's game called art. Art historian Linda Nochlin on why there are so few women art geniuses.
It's because women weren't permitted access to the means of becoming geniuses. Genius is not something like the nugget in Mrs. Grass's golden noodle soup. It's not something that you are born with and it'll just come out no matter what. You have to learn how to be an artist. You have to have access, for example, to the nude male model, something that most women were not permitted to get near, to draw, to study, to dissect, to know the way, you know, the male artist was encouraged to do.
Is it overstating it then to say that in art, throughout history, women's place was in the studio with their clothes off?
Now, that is not an overstatement. You might say always a model and never an artist has been women's position in the art world, with rare exceptions till very recently. If they were encouraged to do modest little watercolors or embroidery or kinds of art that you could do sort of in your spare time when you were running a home.
As you know, there is research suggesting, it's only suggesting, that maybe males, on average, are more gifted in terms of pictorial imagination. They can create pictures in their minds, generally speaking, better than women. Could this make a contribution to the explanation of the lack of women in art?
I would be totally incredulous about any discoveries, which always begin with a presupposition that men are like this, women are like that. I mean, I believe from the moment we're born into the world, we're gendered. We're born into a society, to a language, to a kind of psychosexual life.
So absent the nurture, which so profoundly shapes our goals, our hopes and dreams and attitudes and expressions, you feel the Sistine Chapel might have been painted by a woman, or could have been?
All I can say is that if women had been men, if not having the penis, you should excuse my saying penis, but if not having the penis was the sign of authority and domination, then women would have done the Sistine Chapel and you would have stayed home taking care of the kids.
Jennifer Bartlett is a leading American artist.
If you hear 100 times that women are not capable of making art, women are not capable of flying planes because they're silly, they're emotional, they crack under crisis, one is going to believe that, you know, in a certain sense. So I think that the difficulty of women in prominent positions in any field is one of a kind of self-doubt. So just the questions that are asked of women, is there an imagery for males and females? It's just nonsense. And I find that I get extremely annoyed being asked questions like that, because that question is a reflection of the kind of attitude we have towards women in this country.
But that attitude is changing. The last half of the 20th century has seen a revolution in the workplace. Most women with school-aged children now work outside the home, and less than 50% of the U.S. workforce is white male. A feature of American life that could not have been imagined as recently as the 50s. It's not that women never punched a time clock. They have, but before World War II, most of the women in the workforce were single. Working for a living is part of women's legacy. What is new is the vast number of mothers with young children who now bring home the bacon. The old news is that sexism that kept them out of art continues to keep them out of power. There are women in the boardroom, but not many. Stanford University economist Myra Strober studies the flow of men and women in the workplace.
You can think of the whole workplace, the national workplace, as being a game of musical chairs. And men and women decide which jobs they're going to get. The difference between the workforce and an ordinary game of musical chairs is that men get to choose which jobs they're going to take first.
These games of musical chairs have created almost exclusive female jobs for secretaries, teachers, nurses, and now bank tellers. In 1935, the only tellers were men because the bank executives thought customers wouldn't trust women with their money. But when the male tellers went to fight the Second World War, they were replaced by women. And when the guys came back, they went after the jobs with higher pay. The women stayed on. By 1950, 45% of all bank tellers were female. By 1980, 90%. And the pay stayed low.
There does seem to be a tipping phenomenon within occupations. Once an occupation looks like it's becoming a female occupation, men in that occupation begin to move out even more rapidly than before. And that's because they fear, first of all, that as the occupation becomes female, it will become lower status and lower pay. And in some ways, this is similar to what happens when whites move out of a neighborhood in fear of the fact that their property values will fall. And it's their moving out that causes the property values to fall. But the way the job market has worked in the past, and the way it seems to be working at the moment, is that jobs become either male or female. And if a job is a male job, there are gatekeepers in that job that keep women out.
If the hand of woman has not fully expressed itself in art and in the world of money and power, consider what information is not covered by a communication establishment controlled by men, reporting on problems created by men, and presuming to tell us which stories are the most important. News is what the news people say is news. We wouldn't want it any other way. The problem is that the people deciding what is news are almost always male. University of Missouri journalism professor Jean Gaddy Wilson is publishing a major study on the subject.
My 5-year research on women in the media, bottom line, tells us that while there are more women going into the journalism workplace, they are paid less than men. They do not go up through the ranks of management in the same numbers as they are hired in. Most of the decisions are made by white males. The majority of the editing positions, major editing positions in the United States, and even not the major editing, but the middle management editing decisions, are made primarily by white males.
The number of top female newspaper editors in the United States amounts to less than 12%. And even though more women are in journalism, many complain that the news tends to be segmented by sex in terms of what kinds of events they cover. Newspapers have society pages or lifestyle sections in the back of the paper, and this so-called soft news is covered mostly by women. The front part of the paper is considered the hard news, covered mostly by men. Arthur Alpert, news director of the Financial News Network.
If women are complaining that they are relegated to the back pages with their stories of families and sensitivity and perhaps rape or brutality in the home, and men are allowed to go up to the front page with their stories about war and peace, well, I think that is less true than it used to be. I think women are now going to the battlefields and are now capable or allowed to report the stories of government violence. I think what they should be complaining about is that their stories are in the back. Because whether a man or woman covers them, the story of the family or of domestic violence, that story should be up front.
Baseball want to know how...
Does the news change when a woman is writing it?
Primarily, no, because people are taught the same news values, and those are seen as important. But in my interviewing, I know this, that rape, child abuse, wife battering, all have come through structures because there were women on news desks as reporters in television newsrooms, and they lobbied to get those topics covered.
Myra McPherson, author and Washington Post reporter.
I remember in 1977 when the ERA, there was a major fight of it in Florida, and I wanted to cover it, and my editor said, well, you're going to be biased. And I was just furious, and I said, you know, is a black going to be biased? Is a male going to be biased if he goes and covers something that involves male things? And of course, there was a sort of sense that maybe there wouldn't be balance. Well, I did go, and it was the lead story, and it worked out fine. But I remember when we wanted to do stories on abortion rights at one point, there was always a struggle to get women's issues out front. And I think that on that level, it would change.
I would love to hear an interview with Henry Kissinger, with Pablo Picasso, that concentrated on how the birth of a child affected their work. I don't think anyone would even think of asking that question, because you know the answer already, or you assume you know the answer, that there's 2 or 3 women in the background taking care of everything so that the master can work.
So if you're going to be a genius like Picasso, you're going to need a lot of help. And our double standard is showing when we insist on having the women in the bank count our money while the men manage it. And if all we know about the women's revolution is what we read in the newspapers, then all we know is probably not enough.
The women I know my age who are not married, still single, have that biological clock ticking. They want to get married, they want to have children, but they have a career that they've learned to work at. And it's a tough thing to juggle. I think it's a lot easier being a man in a way right now.
It seems as if this would be a great time for men. The burden has been lessened. I don't know, it seems easier for them these days, and yet they still can't deal with the independence in women. And they're still threatened somehow.
Audrey Chapman, Howard University psychologist and family therapist, deals with people who have these problems.
It's not as easy these days to kind of have close bonds. So I think the single person, man and woman, finds that although they've got great careers going, there's also a lot of void that goes on in their lifestyle, and they always feel that they're in this double bind, that, you know, if they go back to the traditional way, something was missing there. And if they continue going the way they're going, there's a lot missing there. And how do you combine it? How do you integrate it so that it doesn't feel so void?
Surrounded by divorce, today's young men and women are taking a lot longer to pop the big question and answer it. Romance and marriage appear to be, if not banged up, then at least a little groggy. Both men and women are finding it harder to meet and mate. And having a career has, for many women, taken the urgency out of the marriage question. And the men appear to be tentative as well. Increasing numbers of working women are either almost or already past 30 and still single. We call them the new women. And they're still trying to form relationships with the same old men. She's changed, but he hasn't.
The major difficulty for the middle-class male today probably has to do with getting to a place where he can feel the new woman is okay to relate to, she's comfortable to relate to, that you can work out an equal relationship with her.
I remember telling my mother not too long ago that I had invited a man out for a drink. And she said, gee, don't scare him.
The major problem for the average 30 or older female, and I would again say professional because that's a lot I deal with, probably has to do with a need to identify a man in her life.
Well, believe it or not, I'm basically a shy person, so it's difficult to meet people. You look at somebody and you look away, you don't want them to look at you, you're afraid that maybe they won't say hello to you, maybe if you say hello to them.
The game of boy-girl when you're 30 is not any fun.
No, it isn't. It isn't fun, because you go out and you think, well, I'm going to go out, and you think to yourself, I'm going to say to myself, I'm not going to go out and try to meet somebody. But in the long run, that's what you do, because that's what you want to have happen, and it's difficult.
Making it less difficult is Susan Wallace. Her job is president of People Resources, a unique New York club whose membership has access to a library of information about each other, including written bios, pictures, and videotapes. Have you met anybody through this?
I have. As a matter of fact, when I sat down next to Bob, he showed me my picture and said he had just asked me out.
I'm a professional person. There's really nothing wrong with me. I'm normal, and I can speak. I just, in my environment where I live, where I work, I don't meet anyone.
It's so confusing, you know? It's like, what are you supposed to do?
I noticed when I was in my 20s, it was a lot easier. You can go to a bar and people were a lot friendlier. Today, there's a lot of skepticism.
I would go to bars and I'd say, why can't I meet any nice men here? And then I realized that when I was in the bar, I was not a nice person.
You get to a point in your life where it's just, I've had enough of it, and it's time to get serious. I want to have a conversation with someone and not have them want to be jumping on my bones in 2 seconds flat.
I happen to be personally a shy type of a person. I know on a one-on-one situation, I'm terrific. This gives me an opportunity to go one-on-one and get away from the group gatherings.
If I were to join this club, I would be calling every hour on the hour to see how many invitations I get.
There's no confrontation with anyone. I didn't see the guy that I asked out. He didn't see me, so he said no. So chalk it up to experience and you go on. Exactly.
What I like about it is it's not contrived. It's not computer dating. No one's saying, oh, you know, you and she will be terrific together. You just have an opportunity to meet like 1,000 people in 1 year.
I don't think that necessarily everyone that comes here is looking to get married. I think that what's going on now is that being single is not just on the way to something, but it's an alternative lifestyle.
And even when they get married, women are finding a new situation. The old way of the traditional nuclear family, with mom staying at home with 2 kids while dad goes out into the world as the sole breadwinner, now accounts for less than 5% of all households in the United States. Today, the majority of moms and dads work outside the home. For most, it's a financial necessity.
I never really expected to go to work. I expected to get married and raise my children and have my husband support me. And he expected the same thing, I think.
Now, my husband helps a little bit with the housework. He puts the wash in. I still do the cooking. I still do the serving. And sometimes I'm angry because no one serves me.
I do sometimes wish I had somebody to help me out a little bit, but, you know, I realize it's my job. He was brought up believing that it was a woman's work, and it just is a natural thing for him to assume that I'm going to do it.
My husband, first of all, always supported me. He supported me going back to school, and he supports me going back to work. And I almost feel that I'm pressured to go back to work, which we've discussed recently, because handling going back full-time is a lot of pressure on me. Even if he is helpful, it's still the responsibility of being a mother, housekeeper, wife, and professional. Only I have to deal with it.
I'm working full-time now. And with 2 people working full-time and 2 children at home and everything that has to be done, in the beginning, I felt very guilty when my husband would do the housework. I felt that he was doing me a favor by vacuuming, and I felt guilty. I felt that I should be doing that. Or if he did the laundry, that he was doing me a favor. And after a while, I realized that this is my husband's house as well as mine. And if I'm working full-time and he's working full-time, there's no such thing as my roles and his roles.
A Harris poll reveals that working moms devote up to 85 hours a week to career and family, while dads average 20 hours less. And even when the working couple makes a conscious effort to share all the jobs, it's tough to find enough time for the children and themselves.
Oh, Jeffrey!
Jim and I have very busy days. We wake up, the alarm goes off at 5:45. He's out of the door in 10 minutes when he goes to the Y for swimming and exercise. There's very little room in our schedule for something to go wrong, for the children or the babysitter to be sick. Fortunately, we have very healthy children.
Pick up the babysitter at 5 minutes of 7.
drop her off, pick up Karen at 7, go to the ferry. I park the car. She gets a seat on the boat.
Karen Bird is a vice president with a leading investment bank. Jim Borland is a vice president with an employment counseling firm. On the ferry, they catch up on family scheduling and finance. Jim and Karen strive for financial equality by sharing living expenses equally, even though Karen makes much more money.
I definitely have 2 jobs. My commuting time separates the 2 of them. In the morning, I change from my role as a mother and put on a new hat, my role as the business person, and I'm able to make that adjustment in the commuting. On the way home, it's the other way around.
I see my life and my work as a unit. I always have. I see no dividing line between home and work. In that, Karen and I are different. I am what I am, wherever I am.
Not long ago, Jim was offered a promotion, which would have meant moving the family to Washington.
Unfortunately, I work in a field which is very much New York City-oriented, and there would not have been an opportunity for me to do what I do.
So I had to make a decision about whether to do that, knowing that very clearly that Karen didn't want to do that. In the end, I simply didn't feel that it was worth sacrificing her career to do that. And it was a period that it took me about 1.5 years to really relocate. So it was a difficult time for us. So to say on one hand I gave up my career for her would be, I think, short-sighted, because at the same time I also was able to take an extraordinary transition period of time because she supported me.
I wondered if I would feel bad before the children were born if I wasn't there to watch every single step along the way, to see their first step, their first word. But if I wasn't there for the first step, we were there for the second or the third, and they were just as joyous and as exciting.
Karen returned to work 4 weeks after Elizabeth was born. Inez cares and cooks for the children.
I don't have the energy or time at the other end to have that traditional meal.
We'll just sit down and have wine and cheese and fruit with the kids.
Our days are so very full, and one of the problems we have is having time, just Jim and me. The children need both of us and enjoy being with us. Did they see it? Jim was suddenly quite seriously ill last fall, and it made us so aware, brought us together and made us aware that how much we treasure one another, and that we perhaps had gotten sloppy over part of our relationship, and that was the time for just the 2 of us.
It's very easy to get lost in this schedule and in work. And to really look at, somewhat painfully at times, what I wanted out of life, since I wasn't sure I was going to have it too much longer, what I was giving to Karen, what I was giving to the kids in particular, and where things were going to go. I think I would say that we have really improved our relationship in that regard, to the extent that I'm very comfortable with it at this point, 6 months, 8 months down the road.
It's very hard to know how Elizabeth and Jeffrey have lost anything by my full-time working. I hope that they've gained something.
It's very gratifying, I think, to see the kids developing, even if I'm not the one who does everything that my father would have done or Karen's father would have done in a role.
Even couples like Karen and Jim, who strive for an equal marriage partnership, find themselves up against the wall of a society that does not promote this equality. And the patterns of behavior that have been so well established throughout history mean that in most families, no matter how passionate the commitment to shared parenting, no matter how great the combined income, the woman is almost always left holding the baby. The United States of America has succeeded in doing something not even the Wicked Witch could do. We have shaped an economy in which we can no longer afford to stay home and raise the kids. We've created an industry to do that. It's called daycare. Dropping the kids off in the morning has a lot of us a little guilty and a little nervous. We now have a whole new blueprint for women and men Who, when, where, and whether to marry at all are now more complicated questions than they've ever been for human animals. That's because a career has obliged her to become more assertive, just like the boys in the playground. And he must now become more nurturing, just like the girls in the playground. The good news is that the less we limit ourselves by our sex, the happier will be all the children in all the playgrounds. I'm Phil Donahue.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alice Carone. Coming next on Channel 5 News Tonight. Tomorrow will be a Friday many Dallas workers won't forget. Hundreds will get pink slips. Some law enforcement officials are questioning the early release of prisoners, and Tony Dorsett is thinking twice about some of the things he said yesterday. Stay tuned for Channel 5 News Tonight.